The February night was a biting cold, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes your soul tremble. It was on that night that, in an act that broke with the rigidity of his existence until then, he allowed himself something as strange and, to him, dangerous as hope. It wasn't a vibrant hope, full of color and promise, but a faint, almost imperceptible spark, born of the deepest despair. He, a man shaped by relentless logic and the absence of any room for sentimentality, found himself on the brink of an existential precipice where the only apparent escape was resignation. Yet something, an ancient force or a miscalculation in the machinery of his own resignation, compelled him to consider an alternative path, one that, until then, he had categorically dismissed as inefficient and illogical. This script focuses on this anomaly, on the precise moment when the rigidity breaks and the possibility, however remote, arises. The context is a world that values efficiency above all else. Every action, every thought, every relationship is calibrated to maximize results and minimize losses. Empathy is seen as an unnecessary luxury, compassion a flaw in social engineering. In this environment, he stood out not for his adaptability, but for his almost fanatical adherence to this system. He was an architect of this world, one of those responsible for drawing the straight lines and perfect angles that governed everyone's lives. His very existence was a testament to the efficacy of this philosophy, a precision machine, devoid of emotional friction. But perfection has its price, and the price in this case was the complete sterilization of the soul. Brutal efficiency had created a vacuum, and it was in this vacuum that hope, like a stubborn fungus, began to germinate. The central problem is not a lack of resources or the presence of an external antagonist, but the intrinsic flaw of the system he himself helped build. His relentless pursuit of optimization led him to a dead end where life, stripped of all unpredictability, became unbearable. He realized that by eliminating all variables deemed inefficient, including human emotions in their entirety, he had also eliminated what made life meaningful. The cruel irony is that the very tool he used to perfect existence, pure logic, led him to a devastating conclusion. Life without the inefficiency of hope, doubt, and love was not life at all, but a cold and empty simulation. The unique angle of this script lies in its exploration of the precise moment of rupture. We don't follow the slow erosion of his ideals, nor the search for an external revolution. Instead, we focus on a single instant, a lapse of time where logic gives way to a primordial intuition, where cold calculation is replaced by an inexplicable feeling. It is from that February night onward that we follow his journey to dismantle, not an empire or a tyranny, but the very structure of thought he has internalized and disseminated. His struggle is not against something or someone, but against himself, against his own creation. The relevance to the reader's experience lies in the universality of the struggle against imposed rigidity, whether social, personal, or imposed by one's own mind. Everyone, at some point, has felt the pressure to conform, to be more efficient, to suppress what makes us human. This guide offers a glimpse of a path to resisting this pressure, not through brute force, but through rediscovering vulnerability and accepting what at first glance appears to be a flaw. Hope, this primordial inefficiency, becomes the starting point for a redefinition of what it means to live fully. What unfolds from this night forward will not be an epic battle, but an intimate and challenging exploration. The journey will be marked by uncertainty, mistakes, and moments of profound reflection. He will have to relearn how to feel, how to connect, and how to value what he once despised. The central themes revolve around the nature of humanity, the role of emotion in existence, and the possibility of redemption even in a world that forbids such concepts. The fragility of hope, its ability to flourish in the most unlikely places, will be the guiding thread of this narrative. A reminder that sometimes it is our greatest inefficiencies that make us truly capable of living. The February night brought with it not only the cold, but a subtle but definitive internal metamorphosis. He, who had previously operated under the aegis of pure functionality, began to discern a new kind of logic, that of emotional resilience. This realization did not emerge as a sudden insight, but as a natural unfolding of the recognition of the limitations of absolute control. The very idea of control began to be reevaluated, no longer as synonymous with efficiency, but as a potential factor of fragility. Strength, he realized, lay less in the suppression of adversity and more in the ability to bend without breaking in the face of it. Think of how a bamboo, seemingly fragile, resists hurricane winds by yielding and bending, while a rigid oak can be felled. This image, previously dismissed as a biomechanical inefficiency, took on new meaning. Furthermore, the notion that error was inherently harmful began to dissipate. He began to observe natural systems, where mutation and variation, which might be interpreted as errors in a purely deterministic context, were in fact the drivers of evolution and adaptation. Hope, with its inherently uncertain and unguaranteed nature, now seemed less a diversion and more a form of long-term self-optimization, a strategy for navigating a world filled with uncontrollable variables. By embracing this uncertainty, he opened up space for new solutions, for paths that pure rationality, unaccompanied by the intuition that hope fosters, would never have considered. The diversity of strategies, even those that seem suboptimal at first, is what ensures the survival of a complex ecosystem. On the other hand, the practical application of this new understanding manifested itself in his interactions with others. Previously, communication had been strictly transactional, focused on the efficient exchange of information. Now he began to notice nuances, the subtext, the unspoken emotions that permeated interactions. Understanding others' pain, for example, was not seen as an emotional distraction, but as crucial data for predicting reactions and building more lasting and effective bridges of collaboration. Now consider how this newfound sensitivity could be applied to team planning. Instead of assigning tasks based solely on technical competencies, he began to consider individual well-being and motivation, realizing that a cohesive and psychologically safe team, even if slightly less efficient in terms of pure speed, would be more robust and innovative in the long run. In short, the profound redefinition of his operational paradigms began to include a previously suppressed element, the value of imperfection. He began to understand that the relentless pursuit of perfection created a hermetic and fragile system, prone to catastrophic failure in the face of unforeseen events. Hope, by introducing the possibility of a better future, even without concrete guarantees, acted as a buffer against the despair that the absence of such a possibility generated. It became clear that true progress lay not in eliminating all uncertainty, but in developing the capacity to thrive despite it, finding strength in adaptability and the belief that tomorrow can be different. The profound reassessment of hope, far from being a mere sentimental addition, has driven a reconfiguration of strategic decision-making methodologies. Previously, risk analysis was an exercise in quantifying probabilities, where scenarios with a low probability of occurrence were summarily dismissed, even if their consequences were catastrophic. Now, it has come to incorporate the concept of unknowable risk, a category of events whose probability is, by definition, impossible to calculate, but whose potential impacts could destabilize the entire system. Hope, in this context, was not a blind bet, but a proactive stance to mitigate the effects of such uncertainties, cultivating resilience and flexible contingency plans that could adapt to truly unexpected events. Consider how modern cyber defense systems don't limit themselves to blocking known threats, but seek to identify and neutralize anomalous and unknown behavior, anticipating the invisible. Furthermore, the dynamics of innovation underwent a radical transformation. The emphasis on eliminating everything wasteful had stifled genuine experimentation. Ideas that promised significant advances but required investments of time and resources with no guarantee of immediate return were shelved. The introduction of hope as a legitimate factor in the innovation equation allowed the creation of incubators for long-term projects, where failure was not penalized but seen as a necessary stepping stone to learning. Now consider how this would apply to the development of new energy sources. A project that, at first glance, seems inefficient and expensive, but is based on physical principles not yet fully explored, could receive the necessary encouragement, fueled by the hope of a future energy revolution, rather than being discarded for not fitting short-term return metrics. Another crucial aspect of this evolution was the shift in the perception of human fallibility. In a system that prized absolute efficiency, human error was a flaw to be eradicated. However, with the adoption of hope as a valuable element, it began to recognize that human imperfection itself is a source of creativity and adaptability. Vulnerability, once seen as a weakness, began to be interpreted as a gateway to empathy and collaboration. Now, imagine applying this to crisis management. Instead of seeking an infallible leader who makes all the decisions, the approach shifted to creating teams where diversity of perspectives and a willingness to admit uncertainty and seek mutual help became the cornerstones. Hope, in this scenario, is the collective belief in the group's ability to overcome challenges, even when the immediate solution is unclear. Consequently, the very architecture of communication was redesigned. The exchange of information became less about sending raw data and more about constructing shared meaning. Hope, by introducing the possibility of positive outcomes, opened the door to more inspiring and motivational narratives. Instead of simply reporting facts and statistics, communication began to include articulating visions of the future, painting desirable scenarios that served as magnets for collective effort. Consider, for example, public health campaigns. Years ago, the focus would be on alarming data about diseases. Now, the message could be built around the hope of a longer, healthier life, encouraging positive behaviors through the vision of a prosperous future, rather than simply through fear of what might happen. This shift in focus from preventing the negative to cultivating the positive has proven to be a much more powerful catalyst for sustainable change. The redefinition of efficiency has expanded to encompass the management of intangible resources, such as attention and learning capacity. Previously, data collection and processing were the primary focus, with the assumption that more raw information equaled better results. However, information overload has become a critical problem, leading to decision paralysis and diminished cognitive capacity. Hope, by introducing the idea that not all information needs to be immediately processed or understood in its entirety, has enabled a more selective and focused approach. Now, consider how this applies to training new teams. Instead of overwhelming newcomers with extensive manuals and comprehensive historical data, the strategy has become to identify core competencies and nurture a belief in their ability to acquire the rest of the knowledge as needed, promoting gradual, less overwhelming learning. Another crucial aspect of this evolution was the way interdepartmental collaboration began to be viewed. Previously, interactions between different areas were rigidly defined by service-level agreements, focusing on delivering timely, seamless results. This rigidity, however, created knowledge silos and impeded the synergy needed to tackle complex, multifaceted challenges. Hope, by introducing the possibility of more fluid and creative exchanges, paved the way for the formation of cross-functional teams, where spontaneous collaboration and the exchange of ideas, even if they initially seemed out of scope, were encouraged. Consider how agile development teams prioritize open communication and continuous adaptation, in contrast to traditional waterfall models. This approach, fueled by the hope that collective intelligence would result in superior solutions, has proven to be more adaptable and innovative. Additionally, the organizational structure itself underwent a metamorphosis. The rigid hierarchy, designed to optimize the flow of command and control, became an obstacle to agility and rapid response. Hope, by suggesting that authority and initiative could flourish at multiple levels, encouraged the decentralization of decision-making. Now, imagine applying this in a scenario of unforeseen crisis. Instead of waiting for approval from multiple hierarchical levels, distributed and empowered teams, confident in their ability to find solutions, hope in action, could act immediately, mitigating damage and finding alternative paths. This structural flexibility, previously unthinkable, proved to be a competitive differentiator in an increasingly volatile and unpredictable business environment. Finally, time management, one of the pillars of the ancient philosophy of efficiency, was reshaped. The relentless pursuit of optimizing every minute, eliminating any idle time, had led to exhaustion and a lack of space for strategic reflection. Hope, by introducing the value of incubation time, moments dedicated to contemplation, to exploring ideas unrelated to immediate tasks, became recognized as a crucial investment. Consider how an artist dedicates hours to observation and study before beginning a masterpiece. This approach, once seen as a dispensable luxury, is now understood as an essential component of innovation and depth, allowing new connections to emerge and truly disruptive solutions to come to light, fueled by the belief that time dedicated to reflection without apparent purpose can eventually yield unexpected and valuable fruits. As we weave together the emerging lines of thought, we perceive a subtle yet fundamental transformation in the very conception of existence. This is not a simple reordering of priorities, but a profound recontextualization of what constitutes value and effectiveness. What was previously considered noise in the system, an anomaly to be suppressed, now reveals itself as an intrinsic component of resilience and adaptability itself. It is as if an observer, accustomed to seeing the world in black and white, suddenly discovers the infinite richness of shades of gray, and later, the vibrant tapestry of colors. This transition did not occur abruptly, but as an organic unfolding, a gradual illumination that redefines the landscape of understanding. Given these new perspectives, the path toward final reflection takes on clearer contours. The journey thus far has prompted us to consider the depth of interconnections. The way elements previously considered disparate now intertwine to form a more robust and harmonious whole. The search for improved balance, one that transcends the mere optimization of tangible resources, emerges as a guiding thread. It is an invitation to re-examine the foundations on which we build our approaches, recognizing that true strength lies not in unbreakable rigidity, but in adaptive malleability, in the ability to flourish amid uncertainty. Reflecting on this journey thus far, we contemplate a scenario where complexity is no longer an enemy to be mastered, but an ally to be understood and integrated. Intelligence manifests itself not only in the ability to predict and control, but in the ability to navigate the unpredictable waters of the unknown with confidence. Progress, therefore, is no longer measured by the elimination of variables, but by the sophistication in managing their interdependencies. Thus, as we approach the conclusion, we are compelled to consider the broader implications of this conceptual metamorphosis, anticipating the synthesis that will unite these diverse observations into a cohesive and transformative understanding.